And so it all begins on a busy night with our protagonist walking through the city. And so he's recalling his father's most important piece of advice, which was to never get into debt, because from the moment you owe money your life starts falling into a deep abyss. Then our hero heads down into a shabby looking underground place, and inside some guys are gambling while one of them complains about his bad luck, and suddenly a mysterious figure appears at the entrance interrupting their game. It's our protagonist, and he's looking for a man named Bossio. With a calm demeanor he asks if the boss is currently in, and then he gets straight to the point, stating that he's here to collect a debt. The gamblers don't like his attitude and tell our boy to back off, but their boss appears and tells his men to be quiet and show some respect. He then apologizes to the collector, saying his boys are not well educated. Our protagonist doesn't care for apologies and just asks if the money is ready, and so he remembers that the principal was 100 million won with 3% interest for 3 months, so he calculates the total and thinks it's 109 million won. However, our hero corrects him because the contract specified compound interest. The real amount is 109,272,701. Bossio then calls him Kim Sang and asks for a small discount for an old friend, but Kim Sang grabs him by the collar, insisting that every single one must be paid. This makes Hio annoyed and he calls our protagonist cold as ice. And then the scene suddenly cuts to a classroom where our protagonist introduces himself as the new teacher. We see a student sitting calmly but with a very serious look on his face. However, that serious look quickly turns into a menacing and evil smile. So back in the classroom, our hero says he looks forward to working with everyone. But we are snapped back to reality where Hio swings an axe at our boy's head. Hio puts all his strength into the attack, aiming to split our hero in half. But Kim Sang doesn't even flinch as the axe comes right for his face. Instead, he easily dodges the attack and calls Hio shameless, just like the rumors say. Hio is completely shocked that our protagonist closed the gap so fast. And before he can even react, our hero lands a powerful kick, sending him flying. His goons are terrified, calling our protagonist a crazy bastard for what he just did. Kim Sang then steps on Hio's chest, pinning him to the ground with his own axe. He explains that he only lent the money because he was always sure he could take it back, and the other guys are completely frozen in fear, warning each other to stay back. But Hio tells his idiots to attack because our hero won't finish him before getting paid. In response, our boy simply raises the axe, preparing to bring it down on Hio's leg, and so he then looks down and tells the gangster on the floor not to worry about a thing, and because while he has no intention of ending his life, he will make sure he pays. The scene then changes to the outside of an office building at night. Inside, 2 guys are talking about the incident, wondering if that's all their boss is capable of. Back at the office, our protagonist walks in carrying 2 bags full of cash, and his colleague is amazed and compares him to a legendary general returning from war. Kim Sang tells him to deposit the money, and the guy asks if he'll get a bonus for this. The colleague then praises our hero's perfect 100% collection rate. The guys start hyping him up, calling him the collection machine and the god of loans, but our hero tells them to shut up, revealing a back full of scars from past fights. He hands his blood-stained shirt to a rookie and tells him to take it to the cleaners, and then he suggests it's time for the rookie to stop doing errands and get some real work. His colleague agrees and says he has an easy first case for the new guy. He then pulls out a file revealing the rookie's very first mission. The target is a young school teacher who owes 10 million won for a designer bag. Our protagonist takes the file and carefully looks at the woman's information. Her ID shows a picture of a seemingly innocent and harmless young woman. The rookie is excited to finally go on a collection mission, but our hero stays silent. Suddenly, Kim Sang turns around and heads for the exit without saying a word. He tells his confused colleagues that he has one more place to visit tonight. After he's gone, the guys talk about how he works like a machine day and night. One of them even jokes that he might be a debt-collecting robot obsessed with numbers. Meanwhile, our protagonist walks down the stairs with a determined look on his face. In a quick flashback, someone holds up an insurance policy from his dead wife. We go back to another flashback where an old man begs our protagonist for mercy, but Kim Sang just stands there coldly, not showing a single bit of emotion. And so he doesn't seem to care that the money is all the man has left from his wife. This painful memory brings a single tear to our hero's eye in the present. He remembers the heavy weight of the money bags he collected that day. In his mind, it felt like he was collecting lives instead of just collecting cash. Snapping back to the past, he tells the old man he still owes over 28 million won. The old man screams that our hero is going to rot for what he has done. He keeps yelling with pure hatred that our boy is going to burn for this. But our protagonist simply looks back and says that he already knows, and so, because he's going to collect that debt even if he ends up in hell for it. The scene then shifts to a sign outside a loan shark's office. Inside, a man who seems to be the boss is relaxing on a large sofa, and he then presses a button on his desk to call someone into his office. This triggers another memory of a man begging some thugs to save him. From behind a corner, a young boy secretly watches the entire scene unfold. It's our protagonist as a kid witnessing the cruelty of the loan sharks, and after dealing with the man, the thugs finally notice the boy and approach approach him. Soon after, our young hero is forced to kneel before the scary men, and he has no choice but to bow his head down to the ground in total fear. Back in the past, a young boy tells a loan shark that he can't pay the debt. The boss is intrigued by what the kid has to say and listens carefully, and so instead of money, our young hero offers to collect all the debts for him. Returning to the present, our protagonist looks at the file in his hands, and he stares intently at the information of his next target. The ID card shows the face of the young teacher he's supposed to collect from. Back at the office, his colleague is surprised to see him return so soon. He's completely confused about why our hero is still there, so he yells at the rookie for slacking off instead of going to do his job, but the rookie explains that Kim sang and took the case and won himself. The scene then shifts to the outside of a large school building. There, our protagonist finds the teacher he was looking for in a hallway. He tells her she owes 10 million won principal plus 3 million in interest. Without wasting any time, our hero demands that she pays up right now. He then remembers his father's words, never ever go into debt. He looks down at her resident registration card which he has with him. The card clearly shows her name as Kim Yi and in her personal details, and so, he then tells her that was the only lesson their father ever left for them. With tears in her eyes, the girl recognizes him and calls him Oppa. She then grabs his suit jacket in a moment of desperation and shock. His sister Kim Yi and desperately begs our protagonist to save her, but our hero just looks down at her with a cold and emotionless face. Just then, a student named Yi Jun shows up and interrupts their intense conversation. He politely asks Yi and if he should just leave the homework on her desk, and then the student asks who our protagonist is since he has never seen him before. Kim sang and quickly lies, saying he's a teacher on an exchange program. Yi Jun seems a little surprised but accepts the explanation without questioning it, so he apologizes for interrupting them and quickly bows before leaving. Once the student is gone, the tense atmosphere immediately returns. Our boy gives his sister a deadline to have the 13 million won ready. He also warns her not to even think about trying to run away from her debt. Yeonam watches him go with a worried and desperate look on her face. She is left feeling completely defeated and hopeless about her situation. This whole situation then triggers a flashback to 10 years in the past. Back in the present, our protagonist stands outside smoking a cigarette. In the flashback, his sister furiously asks if he forgot how their father died. She reminds him their dad was hounded by debt collectors, which led to his end, and so then Yeon screams at him for becoming the very thing that destroyed their family, and she calls him trash and tells him to stay out of her life forever. And finishing his cigarette, our hero realizes it has already been 10 years since that day. Our hero is haunted by memories of people begging for mercy from loan sharks, and so remembers seeing men on their knees completely powerless and desperate. Now his own sister's tearful face flashes in his mind as she begs him to save her, and so looks at the sky wondering if this pathetic state is what she has fallen into. And standing outside the school, our protagonist waits for her to come out. He checks his phone expecting to see a message from his sister Yeon. He opens his messaging app and goes directly to his conversation with her, but there are no new messages and the chat is completely empty. He wonders what kind of excuse she's going to make this time for not paying. A moment of silence passes as our protagonist just stares at his phone, and then a sudden surge of anger makes him drop his phone to the ground. He glares at the city skyline with a look of pure frustration. His shadow stretches long as the sun sets behind the tall buildings, but his anger doesn't fade and he stares ahead with cold determination. Without a second thought, he smashes his phone with a powerful stomp. The screen shatters into a million pieces, scattering all over the pavement, and the intense look on his face shows that he has finally made a decision. And suddenly some students nearby notice the commotion and are completely shocked. They watch in disbelief as our hero runs off without looking back. Seeing this, Yi Jun realizes he was being shameless and apologizes to his friend. Students on the ground look up in horror at the school's rooftop. They recognize their teacher Ms. Yi, and standing dangerously on the edge. Meanwhile, Yeon thinks about how she used to fear loan sharks the most, but as she stands on the ledge she realizes there are far worse demons out there, and she explains it was these monsters who drove her to get a loan in the first place, and so it remembers her dream was always to become a good teacher. However, she now knows that the classroom is actually a living hell for her, so she decides to set herself free before her soul is completely crushed. While our hero runs to save her, she apologizes for calling him trash. Then a flashback shows her falling as she apologizes to her brother in her thoughts, and with her final thoughts she finally lets go and jumps from the building. Our protagonist keeps running desperately, trying to reach her in time. He remembers the day he realized he had to live the same pathetic life as his father. Back then he reached out his hand as if trying to grasp a new future, and because in that moment he made a decision that changed his life forever, and so the scene goes back to him as a kid watching the loan sharks from a corner, and suddenly his little sister Yi and finds him and asks where he's been. He quickly turns around and pulls her into a tight hug. He then covers her eyes and tells her not to look for her own sake. The loan shark boss then notices the boy and finds him very interesting. Back in the past, the young protagonist cries, realizing his sister will fall into the abyss if he fails. This memory fuels his present self as he runs desperately to save her from that exact fate. He pulls out his new phone and quickly transfers 13 million won to his sister. And so with this action he clears her debt, but he knows that's not the real problem here. A scene then cuts to the school building as our hero finally arrives. He walks through the empty halls remembering his father's words from long ago. Finally he reaches the door to classroom 3-2 where the supposed demons are. And so his father had told him to never get into debt because it's a deep dark hole. And as he looks inside he sees a classroom full of undisciplined delinquents. He now understands that this classroom was his sister's bottomless abyss. With a grim look on his face our protagonist slides the door open. He walks in with a cold expression and all the students immediately stare at him. His imposing presence instantly brings a dead silence to the chaotic room. We then see Yae falling as she admits she had no idea about this living hell. And this is because the classroom is ruled by a group of ruthless bullies. And these students made her life so miserable that she was driven to the edge. Then the scene shifts to a fancy room where Congressman Park Man-cheol is talking. He's meeting with a man named Wang Byung, high in the chairman of Junhong Capital. Chairman Wang cuts to the chase saying the congressman needs a 10 billion won loan. The congressman gets nervous as someone interrupts their very secret meeting, and so a man suddenly interrupts the important meeting between the chairman and the congressman. He then leans in and whispers some very urgent news into Chairman Huang's ear, and after hearing the news the chairman's face turns grim and he decides to leave immediately. He apologizes to the congressman and tells his man to get the car ready right away, and the congressman is confused about the rush but the chairman says to just forget the food. And so, this is because something much more important in their meeting has just come up. The scene then tragically reveals a funeral portrait of our protagonist's sister Kim Yeon. At the funeral we see Chairman Huang kneeling and paying his respects to her. Our protagonist Kim sang and formally thanks the chairman for coming to the service. The chairman tells him not to worry and asks if he's even eating during this hard time. Later the two of them are having a meal while discussing the terrible situation. Chairman Wang thought our hero had cut ties with his sister but blood is thicker than water. He then asks if the police have started an investigation into the bullies responsible. Our protagonist just looks down and remains completely silent for a moment. And so then he looks up and says he intends to meet every single one of them personally. The chairman isn't surprised and seems to understand what our hero is planning. A quick flashback shows the face of a young boy full of rage and determination. The chairman tells our hero that those guys now owe him a great debt for what they did. Kim sang and then looks at his boss with a very serious and unusual request. He asks the chairman to pull some strings so he can become a teacher at that school. Our protagonist explains that this is the most efficient way to collect this particular debt. The chairman bursts out laughing, finding the idea of becoming a teacher to collect a debt hilarious. And so but he agrees to help, saying that planting one person inside a school is a simple task for him. Our hero thanks him for his help but the chairman has a serious warning for him. He reminds Kim Sang that this favor is also a debt that he must one day repay. And so with a grim look our protagonist simply agrees to the terms of their deal. And so the scene shifts to the front of classroom 3-2 where our hero's plan begins. He introduces himself as Kim Sang and the new teacher in charge of their class. Looking at the students he knows the ones responsible for his sister's fate are in this room. So while he looks calm on the outside his mind is racing to find the culprits, and some of the girls in the class immediately comment on how handsome their new teacher is, while the guys are impressed by his physique, asking if he works out a lot. In the middle of the class Yi Jun greets his new teacher with a serious look. Our protagonist acknowledges him but quickly cuts all the greetings short. He tells everyone to prepare for the first period and heads towards the door. The students are confused by his cold attitude and wonder why he's leaving so soon. But just as he's about to exit the classroom our hero suddenly stops. He turns around and prepares to ask a very important question. With a cold stare he asks if anyone in the classroom knows why Kim Yeon ended her life. And his question immediately sends a chill through the classroom as everyone freezes in shock. Seeing that no one is talking our protagonist takes their silence as a no. He then calmly walks out of the classroom leaving the students in stunned silence. Ye Jun is particularly suspicious, wondering why the new teacher asked about that. He then realizes that Kim Yeon and Kim Sang and share the same last name. Meanwhile our hero goes to the faculty office to get more information on class 3-2. The other teachers tell him that the kids in that class are great students. They also mention that 6 students are on sick leave after witnessing the incident, and so this makes our protagonist wonder why someone who got along so well with the kids did this. He starts observing the students from a distance but everything seems normal and suspicious. He can't find a single flaw with the class as they seem to be model students, and so even their relationship with his sister was reported to be very good on the surface. So he decides to check her educational logs and journals for any clues. But even after a thorough search he couldn't find any traces of bullying. This leaves him completely lost and confused about his sister's final words. He then remembers her desperately asking for help from some vicious devils, and so he walks through the empty schoolyard determined to find the truth. And suddenly he overhears someone shouting and he stops to listen carefully. He peeks around a corner and sees a group of students ganging up on a girl, so from his hiding spot he can clearly hear them demanding money from her. The girl just stands there silently as the bullies tell her to pay up immediately, and the scene flashes back to the night of the funeral where our protagonist stands outside, and so suddenly the girl from the schoolyard rushes up the stairs to find him. She gets the attention of the man who was talking to our hero just moments before. From a distance our protagonist watches with a cold and calculating expression. The girl then runs past him calling out the name of his deceased sister. He continues to observe the scene with a silent and thoughtful look. We then see the girl with tears in her eyes as she mourns for her friend, and so, the scene then cuts back to the present where the bullies are mocking the girl, but the leader of the group tells them to knock it off and that he will pay her back. He then asks her how much he borrowed and she confirms it was 500,000 won, but as she reaches for the money he suddenly slaps her hand away. He then calls her uptight for making a big fuss over such a small amount. The poor girl falls to her knees and desperately begs him to give her the money, but the bully just mocks her for lending money she couldn't afford to lose. He stares down at her with a smug and arrogant look on his face. The girl is left on the ground with her hand on her cheek feeling completely helpless. The bully then kneels down and asks if she really needs that money so badly. With a bruised cheek the girl confirms that she really needs the money, and so the bully offers her a deal in exchange for the money she needs. And so he tells her to come hang out with him later and he'll give her the cash. The girl is shocked by his offer but she doesn't have much of a choice, and so, the bullies then walk away telling her to look pretty for their little meeting, and the scene then cuts to a small shop where the girl's mother is being yelled at. The landlord is angry because she's 2 months late on the rent for the shop, and so her mother tries to explain that the money for the rent just disappeared. The girl feels extremely guilty as she's the one who took the money to lend it. This all started when Park Dae-jun asked her to lend him some money one night. At first she refused but he kept insisting saying her mom owned a shop. Since her mother wasn't there he pressured her to do him this one favor, so feeling scared and intimidated she took money from the shop to give it to him, and because of her actions her mother is now in deep trouble with the landlord. She wonders if she should tell the truth but that won't solve the problem. Just then she gets a text from Park Dae-jun telling her to come and get the money, and she's a bit surprised that he's actually going to pay her back so soon, and so even though she's scared she knows she has to get that money back for her mother, so she goes to a karaoke bar to meet up with Park Dae-jun and his friends. And she nervously knocks on the door and he's surprised that she actually came. Park Dae-jun then pulls her inside and tells her to hurry up and join them, and so his friends mock him for being a flirt but he promises to show her a good time, but the girl makes it clear that she's not there to hang out with them at all, but Park Dae-jun just puts his arm around her and tells her to relax. He then whispers that she knew full well what she had to do to get the money. The girl is completely disgusted by his words and tries to push him away. Suddenly he grabs her jacket and starts to pull it off her shoulders, and she desperately begs him to stop but his friends just laugh at her. Park Dae-jun then calls her a tsundere for pretending not to like it, so with tears in her eyes she tells him to let go as she only came for the money, but he ignores her pleas and tells his friends to bring him a water bottle. One of the guys gets excited and says they should do a water bomb on her, and so, they all agree that she has to perform for them if she wants to get the money. Park Dae-jun then grabs the bottle and prepares to spray her with water, and his friends get their phones ready to record a legendary video of the whole thing. In that moment the girl remembers her kind teacher and who's now gone, and she closes her eyes and prepares for the worst but then everything goes silent. The bullies suddenly stop and stare at something in the doorway with fear. Park Dae-jun is also frozen in place looking at the unexpected visitor. A mysterious figure stands at the entrance and asks who they are, and it's our protagonist and he tells Park Dae-jun to let go of the girl's hand. The girl looks up and is shocked to see the new teacher standing there. This triggers a flashback to Yeon's funeral where the same girl was crying her eyes out. The girl is shocked to see the man from the funeral suddenly appear, but Park Dae-jun doesn't recognize him and asks who he is to give orders. Our protagonist just repeats himself and tells the bully to let the girl go. One of the other guys then recognizes him as the new homeroom teacher, but Park Dae-jun doesn't care and shoves the girl away to confront our hero, and he then mockingly asks if the new teacher is the girl's uncle or something. Our protagonist remains silent as the bully continues to taunt him. Park Dae-jun then makes a vulgar offer to the girl right in front of him, but before he can even finish his sentence our hero lands a powerful punch. The bully goes flying across the room and crashes hard onto the floor. He's left dazed and confused as he tries to process what just happened. The girl is completely speechless and can't believe what she just witnessed. Our protagonist then reveals that he knows she was the only student at the funeral. He then tells her that he won't forget the debt of her coming to see his sister off, and this makes him even more determined to protect her from these vicious bullies. The other guys are shocked and can't believe their leader just got knocked out. Our hero then turns to them and says they borrowed money from the girl. He then calculates their debt with a 30% weekly interest rate. Since they are 8 weeks overdue, their new total debt is much higher now. The final amount comes out to a whopping 4,078,653 won. Park Dae-jun gets up and furiously asks why he should pay that absurd amount, and he then tries to argue that it doesn't make any sense to owe so much. Our protagonist calmly agrees that it doesn't make sense at the moment, but he then adds that from now on it will make perfect sense to them. Meanwhile, outside the karaoke bar, our hero's colleagues are getting worried. The rookie is confused about why their boss is following a bunch of kids. He keeps asking questions, but his senior is just as clueless as he is. The senior then scolds him for questioning their boss's orders, and so, he admits that he doesn't know what's going on, but one thing is for sure. Once those kids became the boss's target, their lives are pretty much over. Back inside the karaoke room, the tension is higher than ever before. Park Dae-jun gets up from the floor with a look of pure rage on his face. He demands to know who our protagonist is to tell them what to do. Our hero then calmly introduces himself as their new homeroom teacher. The girl is surprised to hear that he's a teacher from her own school. The bullies are also shocked and accuse him of extorting money from them, but our protagonist clarifies that he's simply settling debts between students. He then adds that correcting unhealthy financial relationships is a teacher's duty. The bullies don't care about his excuses and get ready to fight him. They all rush towards him at once, threatening to beat him to a pulp. Our hero is disappointed that they chose violence over paying their debts, and so he then effortlessly dodges their attacks and lands a clean punch on one of them. And the other guys are shocked, but they don't even have time to react. Our protagonist quickly takes down the second bully with another powerful blow. He calls them pathetic as he continues his relentless assault on the group. Park Dae-jun is left completely stunned and can't believe what just happened. The girl who was being harassed is also watching in total disbelief. Our hero then gives the bullies one day to pay their debt in full, but Park Dae-jun still has some fight left in him and tries to get up, so our protagonist grabs him by the hair and slams his face into the ground. He then warns them that if they don't pay, hell will seem like a better option. And so after dealing with the bullies, our hero turns to the girl and confirms her name, and so he then tells her not to just stand there, and that she should leave immediately. The girl is a bit taken aback by his cold demeanor, but she understands. She then musters up the courage to thank him for saving her from them. Our protagonist tells her not to worry about it and that she should go home, and she walks away. The girl wonders who this mysterious man really is, and she remembers him saying he won't forget the debt of her coming to the funeral. She then realizes that he's not just a teacher but also his sister's older brother, and in all of these coincidences start to paint a much bigger and scarier picture. The girl then asks our protagonist if he's here to find out what happened to his sister. Our hero just looks at her without saying a single word in response, and so she then tells him that he shouldn't have helped her because those guys are relentless. From the ground, Park Dae-jun swears that he won't let our protagonist get away with this, and so, the girl warns him that if they report him he'll be kicked out of the school for sure. But our hero just looks down at her with a calm and confident expression, and so he then tells her that they'll just have to wait and see what happens next. The next day at school, everything seems strangely quiet and peaceful, and some students are watching a video on a phone and are impressed by what they see. The girl who was saved by our hero is confused because nothing is happening, and she expected the bullies to come after her, but they are all acting normal. She then looks over at Park Dae-jun, who is just sitting quietly at his desk, but then one of his friends gets up and walks towards her desk. He calls out her name and she immediately gets nervous, thinking he's here for revenge. However, she's completely shocked by what he does next. He shows her his phone and says he transferred her share of the debt money. He explains that they split the total amount and each paid their part. He then tells her to let the teacher know that he paid back the money. The girl is left completely stunned and doesn't know what to think. Meanwhile, Park Dae-jun is furious that his friend paid the debt so easily. Outside the school, Park Dae-jun furiously confronts his friend for paying the debt, and he can't believe that he got scared after getting hit just one single time. But his friend yells back that it's not about the punch at all. He then reminds Park Dae-jun about the scary message they all received. In a flashback, we see the bullies in the karaoke room after the fight. They were planning to report our hero to the school board for what he did, but then they all received a mysterious message on their phones at the same time. The message contained all of their personal information in frightening detail. This includes their passwords, addresses, and even their great-aunt's address. The bully explains that if they don't pay, who knows what the teacher will do, and he then warns Park Dae-jun that they messed with the wrong guy this time. Just then the other bully also starts to transfer the money to pay his share. He's terrified that his dad will find out and that he'll be in huge trouble. Park Dae-jun is furious and calls his friends a bunch of traitors, but they don't care and tell him to pay up fast if he doesn't want to die. They then walk away, leaving him alone to deal with the consequences, and the scene then cuts to another classroom where a different lesson is taking place. Park Dae-jin is there, but he's too distracted to pay any attention, and so, he's in a complete panic because he doesn't have the money to pay the debt. And to make things worse, our protagonist suddenly appears behind him. Our protagonist reminds Park Dae-jun that it's almost 5 o'clock. He then tells him to save his pointless thoughts for when he's at home. Park Dae-jin gets up from his desk with a look of pure rage. He then kicks the desk and storms out of the classroom in frustration. He can't believe that this new teacher just showed up and caused so much chaos. Suddenly Yi-jun appears and asks if he's having trouble with his teacher, and so, he explains that he heard from his friends that the bullies were borrowing money. Park Dae-jin calls them idiots and says they deserve it for being disloyal, and so, Jun then tells him that there is a way to not pay back the money. He offers to share his plan with Park Dae-jun, who is now very interested. Park Dae-jun is a bit suspicious, but he's desperate for a way out. The scene then cuts to the outside of the school in the late afternoon. Our protagonist is standing there waiting as the sun begins to set. The girl he saved then approaches him and asks if he collected all the debts. She explains that everyone paid her back except for Park Dae-jin, and so because of him her mother was able to pay the rent for the shop in time, and she then thanks him from the bottom of her heart and bows deeply. But our hero tells her that there is no need to thank him for his actions, and so he then adds that he was just paying back what he owed to her. And as Park Dae-jun appears in the distance, he says there's still one debt left. Park Dae-jun smirks confidently as he faces our protagonist. Our hero asks him if he brought the money to pay back his debt, but the bully just laughs and says he didn't come here to repay anything. He then reveals that he's here to make a deal with our protagonist. In a flashback, Jun proposes a plan to Park Dae-jin. He reminds him that teachers also have personal information that can be used. With a sinister smile, he then reveals that he knows a lot about our hero. Park Dae-jun decides to use this information to make a deal. He offers to reveal why his sister jumped in exchange for his debt. With a smug look, he asks our hero if the offer is tempting enough, and he's so confident that his plan will work and he'll be off the hook. Our protagonist remains silent for a moment as he considers the offer, so then he looks at the time and says that it's already past 5 o'clock. Park Dae-jin is confused and doesn't understand what he means by that. Our hero then starts walking towards him with a very serious expression. The bully panics and reminds him about the deal they were about to make, but our protagonist doesn't care and grabs him by the throat, and so he then reminds him of the warning he gave him back at the karaoke bar. If the debt wasn't paid by 5, he would make him wish he was in hell. Park Dae-jun struggles to breathe as our hero's grip tightens around his neck. With a cold and menacing look, our protagonist promises to make him suffer. It all starts at a quiet port where the only light comes from a distant lighthouse. Soon we hear someone struggling and pleading for help near some fishing boats. Then we see our boy Sang-in looking terrified and begging for his life. But an old man in a hat is with him and tells him to watch closely. The man then orders Sang-in to proceed and he reluctantly agrees. While our protagonist hesitates, the person in distress continues to beg and even offers money. Suddenly we see that Sang-in is watching a man being taken down by 2 thugs. The old man tells Sang-in to get used to seeing such desperate faces. Our boy can only watch with a cold expression as the grim scene unfolds. In another place we see a man with glasses looking on with a calm expression. His gaze is fixed on a young man with red hair who looks absolutely furious. It turns out the teacher is confronting the student while a girl watches in shock. The girl covers her mouth and begs the teacher to stop what he is doing, but the man with glasses seems unfazed by the student begging to be spared. He grabs the student's neck and says he finds the whole situation amusing. After that he lets go and the student falls to the ground gasping for air. The teacher then looks down at him and says he has not even started yet. However, he just turns around and walks away, leaving the student confused. The red-haired boy wonders if the teacher will go after his parents for a debt, but he quickly realizes he doesn't need to worry about that at all. He thinks his parents are safe, but as he gets into a car he complains about his driver. Suddenly the man grabs him from behind and covers his mouth with a cloth, and so the attacker tells him he has bad luck and that this is because his parents didn't pay up, and so then he tells Dagon to get some sleep because he will need his strength for a while. And so, and just like that, the red-haired boy is knocked unconscious. He is woken up later by a huge splash of cold water right in his face. A fisherman-looking guy asks him how long he plans on sleeping. Then a man tells him to get to work if he wants to pay off his debt. Dagon is confused and angry, demanding to know where he is and why it smells like fish. He then looks around and realizes he is on a fishing boat in the middle of the ocean. And 10 days later we see a haggard Park Dae-gun who is now a deckhand on the boat. Of course, at first he didn't accept his new reality and tried to argue, and so he even grabbed one of the fishermen and demanded they turn the boat around. but the man was much stronger and easily slammed him onto the deck, and the fisherman pulls out a knife and says there are only two ways to leave the boat. The first is to work off his debt fair and square. The second option is to become fish food at the bottom of the ocean, and so he is told he will be beaten by the crew and then forced to work to pay off the debt. So Park Dagon begins his life of physical labor for the first time, and his seniors taught him with club, which meant getting kicked for every little mistake. So by the fourth day he could finally organize the nets and was already sick of his new life. Time on the ocean passed slowly for Dagon as he got seasick and was forced to work. Back at school 10 days have passed and the students see something strange, and so they wonder if they should call for help as they see a zombie-like figure approaching. But it is just Park Dagon from class 3-6 looking like he just came back from war, and so relieved to be back he promises himself that he will never borrow money again. And most importantly he vows that he will never set foot on that horrible boat again. But just then the teacher with glasses appears and tells him he's going back next week. Dagon is completely confused by this and asks what he is talking about. He yells that he worked his butt off for 10 days on that stinking boat to pay his debt. The teacher tells him not to get ahead of himself because the debt is not paid off. He explains that Dagon missed a payment while on the boat so the interest grew, and so on top of that more interest was added while he was gone making the total even bigger, and so the teacher then breaks down his earnings with deductions for being an apprentice and fees. And so after 10 days of hard labor he still owes over 1,500,000 won. Dagon explodes with anger yelling that this is illegal and a violation of his rights, but the teacher just asks if he thinks it is okay not to pay his debts, and so he even claims that without the job the interest would have been much worse, and the teacher then tells him to get ready because the next trip is in 4 days. Dagon is left in complete shock realizing he has to go back to that boat again. In another part of town a man asks to speak with his team leader. Inside an office the teacher from before gets an investigation report from his subordinate. The report is on the 20 students of class 3-2 and 10 have been checked so far. The teacher immediately asks if there were any anomalies found. His subordinate hesitates and says that is actually why the agencies were asking questions. Apparently the reports are suspiciously clean with absolutely no issues found. The first 10 students investigated were not just normal but practically model students. The teacher then asks if the investigation was done in order of their numbers. After confirming he checks the next file which belongs to a student named Yejin. But just as he does his phone lights up with a new notification, and so it is a message from Park Dagon telling him to bring the money to a specific address. So the teacher then tells his subordinate to go home because he has some business to handle. Meanwhile Dagon is waiting for him in an arcade full of claw machines. He is fuming and wonders if the teacher thinks he is some kind of slave. He then vows that debt or no debt the teacher is a dead man today. And suddenly another student appears and makes fun of him for being forced onto a boat. Dagon is not amused and yells at him for help after getting him into this mess. And the student calmly reminds him that he has gotten rid of a teacher once before. Dagon is shocked when the other student says he will help him out. He then explains that last time was just a test, and this time he will help for real. And Yejin reveals that the teacher is Kim An's older brother, which could make things annoying. Dagon freaks out because he knows that guy is a Hulk, and this makes everything super complicated. But Yejin just smiles and tells him not to overthink it and just lure the man to the location. So Dagon waits nervously in the arcade for the teacher to show up, and soon enough he hears footsteps approaching from the entrance. And so the teacher finally arrives and announces that he brought the money this time. However, Dagon just scoffs and says he did not bring anything for him. Our hero seems unfazed by this and says the kid is even bolder than he thought. Then he asks Dagon if he is absolutely sure about how he wants this to play out. And so, because it doesn't look like he has enough guys as the teacher points out the hidden thugs. And Dagon is completely shocked and orders his guys to come out wondering how he was noticed. A whole group of goons armed with bats suddenly surrounds our protagonist. Dagon then lists his 2 demands starting with his debt being completely cleared. And for his second demand he wants the teacher to leave the school for good. And the teacher ignores him and asks who is the one that set this whole thing up. And so then walks towards the thugs saying Dagon doesn't have the brains for a plan like this. Dagon panics as the thugs move to block the teacher's path. He screams at his goons to hurry up and finish our hero off. The teacher just calmly repeats his question as one of the thugs swings a bat at his head. But he dodges the attack with ease, proving he is not in a position to be answering questions. Before the thug can react, our hero grabs his fist mid-swing, and then with incredible speed he reaches for the man's head. And with one powerful motion he smashes the thug into his friends. Dagon is completely speechless watching the scene unfold before his eyes. Our hero holds a beaten man and asks his question one last time. He dangles the thug's body through the broken glass of a machine. Covered in blood he intensely demands to know who planned this whole setup. He repeats his question looking down at the unconscious man in his hand. While holding the man's body he asks again who is behind all of this. With a cold and bloody expression he demands to know who set this up, and so the other thugs are hesitant to attack after seeing what happened to their friends. Their leader yells at them to stop hesitating and just attack him already. So the whole group of goons rushes forward to take down our protagonist. The arcade becomes a blur of motion as our hero fights them all at once. One of the thugs gets his face completely rearranged by a powerful punch. In an instant the teacher takes down the entire group of attackers with ease. He stands among the fallen bodies covered in blood but completely fine. The last thug standing screams and swings his bat with all his might, but our hero effortlessly stops the attack with just one hand. The thug can only look on in shock, completely defeated. He then sends the last thug flying into a claw machine with a single punch. From the side a voice yells at the idiots for attacking one by one instead of all at once. The thug leader rallies his remaining men, saying they cannot possibly lose to this one guy. With a renewed sense of purpose he grabs a teddy bear from a machine believing they can win. But all he gets for his trouble is the teddy bear smashed right into his face. The now bloody stuffed animal goes flying as the leader is knocked out cold. And suddenly we see Dagon standing over the unconscious body of one of the goons. And so he looks around in complete disbelief, wondering what in the world is happening. So from his point of view the remaining thugs are still trying to fight our hero, but the teacher effortlessly takes them all down, leaving Dagon to wonder how he is winning. And so with all the troublemakers gone, our protagonist calmly turns his attention to Park Dagon. Seeing his reflection in the glass, Dagon starts screaming, realizing he is dead if he gets caught. He knows that he absolutely cannot let the teacher catch him now. But before he can even think about running, our hero sends him flying with a swift kick. Dagon struggles to get up, determined not to end up like the rest of the thugs, and so looks over at the pile of unconscious bodies, absolutely terrified for his life. In a final desperate act he scrambles to his feet and runs away screaming. The teacher just watches him go, saying that running away does not really matter, because once you have seen the light there is absolutely nowhere left to run. And Dagon immediately gets on the phone and screams at Yejin that they are screwed. He frantically says he barely escaped and begs Yejin for help, but Yejin simply tells him to deposit 5 million won. He explains that as the hiring fee for the thugs Dagon hired. Yejin then coldly adds that he never said his help would be free. Dagon screams that he is already in debt and has no money to give. Yejin agrees that is a problem as two men approach Dagon from behind. He then informs Dagon that from now on he is in his debt. The new loan has a 45% annual interest rate, compounded of course. With an evil smile Yejin says he will find him a good job to pay it all off. Meanwhile our hero Mr. Kim sang and reflects on the fight he just had. He admits that facing over 10 people by himself was quite unexpected, but a small smile creeps on his face as he thinks this will be fun. Back at the arcade the thug leader wakes up and calls our hero a monster. Suddenly a man with a ponytail arrives and yells at his men for the mess, and the thug recognizes him as his team leader and is shocked to see him there. The new guy scolds his subordinate for the bloody scene he found. He then demands to know exactly what happened in the arcade. The man explains that a kid hired them to take care of a teacher. The team leader immediately asks how much he was paid for this side job, and he is absolutely furious when he hears they were paid only 5 million. But the subordinate tries to explain that the teacher is no ordinary man before getting hit. His team leader is absolutely furious about the outcome of the fight. He yells that with a good capital business card they should not lose to a single teacher. The man is clearly angry that his team's reputation has been tarnished by this loss. He then demands to know the name of the teacher who caused all this trouble. The beaten thug weakly manages to say the name Kim Sang-in. A sinister smile spreads across the team leader's face now that he has a name. Later that night our protagonist returns to his office building. He finds his subordinate, the man in the floral shirt, still working at his desk. The man says he is still a rookie loan shark, so he wants to help with paperwork. Then he admits to Sang and that he wants to become a loan shark just like him. He even calls our hero his role model and Korea's #1 loan shark. And just looks down and says that loan sharks are nothing but trash. He calls them monsters who value money over human life and drag people into the abyss. He finishes by saying they are all trash that is sure to fall into hell when they die. And then he takes off his shirt, revealing a scarred body, asking if he really wants to be like him. The subordinate admits that their work is indeed filthy, but as Sang and tells him to go home, the man insists that he is not that kind of trash. Our hero looks at him, curious to hear what he has to say, and subordinate then reveals he heard that Sang and chose this life to save his sister. He then declares that if Sang is trash, then he does not mind becoming trash too. This reminds our hero of a time when the young man was desperately begging for help. He realizes that this kid is in the same desperate situation he once was, and Sang and then tells his subordinate that he will not stop him from becoming trash. And so he then orders him to go out on collections alone starting from the next day. But he makes the young man promise him one very important thing. Once he pays back the money he borrowed for the surgery, he has to leave the business, and the subordinate hesitates for a moment but then promises to do his best. Later as Sang is walking down the street, he thinks about Dagon's accomplice. He knows the kid is broke, so the accomplice is probably not after money. He then realizes that Dagon was used to test him and the goal was to make him leave school. The only reason for this he can think of is to stop him from investigating Kim Yean, the teacher in his class that supposedly took his own life, and so he decides there is no need to actively seek out the mastermind. And so, because the closer he gets to the truth, the more the culprit will have to reveal himself. And so just then his subordinate catches up to him and hands him the tie he forgot. Back in the office, the young man is ecstatic about finally going on collections. He starts thinking about what he should wear to look intimidating. A brilliant idea then pops into his head as he realizes what he needs to do. To be truly intimidating, he decides to wear glasses just like his team leader, and he fantasizes about threatening people if they do not repay the light. Suddenly he hears the office door open and sees a dark silhouette. He is surprised to see his team leader and asks if he came back for his tie, but he is quickly silenced by a swift and powerful blow to the face, and Sang and then leaves the office building and walks down the street. He stands for a moment looking up at the rooftops, lost in thought. Later he returns to the office to find his subordinate beaten and bloody. He is completely shocked by the scene that has unfolded in his absence. The young man is barely conscious as he sits in a chair surrounded by blood. Sang rushes to his side and checks for a pulse, finding one. He realizes the wounds were not made by a knife or bare hands but a blunt weapon. Just then he senses a presence in the room and sees some shelves moving. The shadows of several people appear on the floor as they surround him. But instead of being scared, our hero is disappointed by this turn of events, and so one of the attackers then hits him from behind and he thinks this will be troublesome. The man with the ponytail reveals himself as team leader Choi Oh-chil from Good Capital. Sang warns him that this could escalate into a company-level problem, but Oh-kil claims he had a reason for attacking his subordinate. He reveals that the thugs Sang and beat up earlier were his men, and so our hero then meets with the principal of Solbit High, who is helping him with his goals. After the meeting, Sang thanks the man for his help, but the old man warns him that this is a personal matter, not a company one. Our hero finds this troublesome and decides he must settle this on his own level. Back in the office, Choi Oh-kil says he has plenty of reason to mess Sang up. Our boy just calmly notes that Oh-kil ran here panting, eager to take him down, and the former mentor is indeed looking forward to this fight very much. A flashback reveals Oh-kil was a former team leader at another company. He once told a young Sang and that to survive he had to become terrifying. We then see how he brutally trained our hero by beating him senseless. The young Sang explained that people only pay when they fear for their lives. Oh-kil then said he was the same, paying his father's debt to survive. However, he quickly corrected himself, saying Sang's case was a bit different, because our hero was not afraid for his own life but for his little sister's, and so back then Oh-kil mocked the boy for clenching his teeth at the mention of his sister. He was annoyed that the old man had dumped this brat on him for training, so with a wicked smile he decided to start the session by breaking a rib. Returning to the present, Oh-kil mocks Sang and for becoming a team leader. He then gets ready for a fight with a confident look on his face. Oh-kil lunges forward, saying he wants to see how much his student has grown, and just like that the two former colleagues are ready to clash in a brutal fight. Oh-kil mocks Sang and for getting quicker since the old days, and he says that in the past his skull would have been cracked open by now. He then notices that our hero does not want to make a big scene, and so he offers a simple solution to their current problem. All Sang has to do is smash his head into the ground and apologize. He then kicks the air to demonstrate what he means by smashing. With a smug look he asks if they have a deal, but our hero reminds him that his men attacked first and put his teammate in a coma. With a firm stance he absolutely refuses to apologize. Oh-kil is not surprised, saying Sang has always been defiant, and that defiance has always pissed him off to no end. He screams that Sang always followed the old man's orders but never his, so he sees this as a perfect chance to teach him a lesson, and so he lunges at our hero ready to show him what happens when his orders are refused. Sang's calm expression shows a single drop of sweat as the fight is about to begin, but he knows there is not much time because his subordinate needs medical attention. Oh-kil taunts him for worrying about an underling at a time like this. He then charges forward, telling Sang to focus on him instead. Our hero prepares to counter the attack with a powerful punch, but Oh-kil is faster and our boy can only watch as a bloody hammer comes at his face. But our hero manages to dodge the attack at the very last second. Oh-kil remembers teaching him to dive, and when facing a blunt weapon, he smirks and says Sang is doing well just like he was taught. And so, but he questions if such a basic move would work on the one who taught it to him, and Sang's unfazed expression in this situation still gets on his nerves. Our protagonist then admits that he does hate his former mentor, and with a grin he adds that the feeling is mutual before striking back. Oh-kil is shocked that his student did not dodge the attack. He realizes that Sang is trying to mess with his predictions, and Sang then explains that he only refused Oh-chil's orders because he could not accept them. With a powerful blow he sends his former mentor flying across the room. He remembers being ordered to kidnap a woman's child for a missed payment. The memory of that event still fills him with rage and disgust. Blood spurts from Oh-kil's nose as he takes the full force of the punch, Sun also recalls being told to burn down shops to force people into debt. With another powerful hit he sends O'Keel crashing into a wall. He then remembers the way his mentor used to enjoy the despair of others. All of these memories fuel his anger as he relentlessly attacks his former teacher. O'Keel is completely overwhelmed by the sudden and brutal assault. He can't believe that the weak punk he once trained has become this strong, and so, he can't accept the student he trained is now looking down on him. O'Keel then laughs and says saying, and thinks he is so different from him, and he spits that they are both the same kind of trash and nothing more. Our hero agrees that he is trash too, but with one key difference. At least he does not enjoy the horrible work that they have to do, and sang and then says it was good to see him again and turns to leave. And so O'Keel is shocked that he is just going to leave him there. He even threatens that this will not be over if he is allowed to go. But our hero reminds him that as a loan shark he knows what it means to owe a debt, and so he then walks towards the exit with his unconscious subordinate in his arms. He tells O'Keel that right now he owes him his life, and the moment he leaks what happened today will be his repayment date, and Sang then warns him not to stir things up emotionally like he did. So with his subordinate safely out of the office he leaves without another word. O'Keel's left alone on the floor and calls our hero a vicious loan shark. He then laughs at the irony of Sang and telling him not to act emotionally, because for someone saying that our hero was way too emotional himself. Later at the hospital the young man wakes up in a bed. He is bandaged up and recovering from the brutal attack he suffered. He looks around confused, wondering where he is and what happened. He wakes up in a hospital bed and is surprised to see his team leader there, and Sang explains that the attacker was his old mentor from his rookie days, and so the attack was meant for him, so his subordinate was just in the wrong place. The man then says he was at the office organizing the Solbit High student records, but while doing that he suddenly remembers finding a really strange guy in the files. He is absolutely sure that this student is definitely not a normal person. The scene then shifts to the classroom where Sang is taking attendance. He calls out several names for class 3-2 and the students respond. He then calls out the name Yejin, who is Dagon's accomplice. Yejin confidently raises his hand and says that he is present, but our hero looks at the attendance sheet and calls his name a second time. This leaves Yejin completely confused as he asks why he was called again.